But essentially, what we're here to do is bring leaders who are going to be at our upcoming executive symposium next week together to share their thoughts, their insights, their perspectives on how to drive people-centric growth. And ultimately, we recognize that we're in an interesting economy right now. We've got an interesting workplace. We've got a lot of interesting things going on professionally. And having a place, a space, a dialogue to actually share our insights, share our wisdom, share our perspective is huge for more or less just creating the space for these conversations to happen so we can all grow together. Because we know when there is uncertainty, Selena, you were sharing this beforehand, when there's uncertainty, growth can occur. And yeah, ultimately, and this is all a lead up to our executive symposium next week, October 7th, going to be held in Houston at the Houston Dynamo Stadium. So, anyways, Brady, Selena, Thomas, welcome. Do you mind introducing yourselves? Brady, do you mind going first?
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. Excited to be here this morning. Excited for next week's event as well. My role is the Chief HR and Inclusion Officer at Space Center Houston. My CEO likes to refer to me as our Cheerio. And been here about 2.5 years. Space Center Houston, we serve 1.3 million guests each year, and been here, like I said, 2.5 years, following a 30-year career in human resources at NASA. Glad to be here.
Very cool. Selena, how about you?
Hi, yes, Selena Young. I am the head of HR business partnering at Seadrill. We are an offshore driller. My role, I mainly focus on the onshore operations, but at the end of the day, as our focus is focus on the drill bit, we're all out to support everyone who's out on the rig every day, making it happen. I've been in human resources for going on 20 years and definitely enjoyed. It's my passion to work with people.
Very nice. And then Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, Thomas Gilman, Driving Business Growth is my LLC. And after 40 years in the corporate world, I now consult with business owners and CEOs, helping them grow their business.
Very nice. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is by bringing executives together for executive symposiums. So let's dive in. So topic is people-centric growth, aligning purpose, leadership, and profit. We're in such a fascinating time period right now. I feel like there's so much change happening within the workplace, whether it be AI, whether it be technologies, whether it be people increasing their operational efficiencies, boards driving the message home to the CEO and the executive team saying we need to be more efficient, whatever it may be. We're seeing a lot of these messages. I personally, my take is I see a lot of these messages around profitability. How do we go about achieving profitability without being so short-sighted about running on the quarter-to-quarter basis? I think that's to start off this question. I guess the first question I'd like to kick off with is how can we achieve some of the profitability goals that maybe our boards are trying to help us hit in the short term, especially on a quarterly basis, especially for like a public company, um, while not sacrificing the long-term growth of our people, because we recognize that successions do happen, people do leave, new leadership needs to step up into new roles, and ultimately, if we're so short-sighted that we're thinking to ourselves like, oh, we have this person, they're in an in-betweener role, let's just let them go because we don't have a spot for them to step up into the senior leadership ranks. Could be short-sighted when the day comes when you actually need that person. So I'd like to kick off with a question is how can we achieve some of these profitability goals we're trying to hit while at the same time not sacrificing the people growth that ultimately is needed for the long-term growth of our organizations? Who wants to kick us
I'm
off?
happy to start and
Yeah.
share that one of the initiatives that we have found extremely important throughout this process begins at the very beginning of the life cycle for the employees. It's starting when we are recruiting and when the talent acquisition team is getting out there. It's always essential to make sure that the candidates meet the minimum expectations and requirements for the roles. But we're hiring not just for skills, but we're ensuring alignment with the company's value and mission from the very beginning, putting it out there on the posting, reiterating it with our questions and conversations during the interview process to make sure that the candidates that are coming on board have a realistic view of what to expect at the organization and how they would play into that. And then testing them from the very beginning of will you be able to make it and cut it to where we're striving to go next?
Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I was involved in the recruiting effort, for many, many years. And it's so true that the quality of the candidate, not only from technical standpoint, but also how to work in a team, how to communicate, those aspects really allow you to hire people that are going to be more successful so that, you look at that as an asset rather than an expense. And so that's the other thing about the financial side of, people is that those are people that you're trying to grow into, productive members. They're just not to use for a couple of years and see them rotate out. And so really it comes from the top of how people are treated, at the lowest levels, because, you can't fake that. And so I would say my experience is it's really quick for young people to understand where their company sits on the people side of things.
Yeah, and a good example to illustrate that, Thomas, from my time at NASA, when we would go through the astronaut selection process, which you could have anywhere from 8,000 to 15,000 applicants for 10 roles. We would look at how people treated the receptionists. How did they treat the nurses? How did they treat the people who weren't involved in the process? Because NASA very much operates as a team, and that's part of the culture. And so we would screen out some really smart people, really good candidates, because they would treat different people in the process differently, and they would not have fit the NASA culture, would not have represented NASA well. So that it's so important to find the right culture fit for your organization.
Yeah, that's interesting. All he brought up really interesting points about hiring the right people and like making sure that we're bringing the right people on board because yeah, ultimately, I guess if we're going to grow, if we're going to achieve people-centric growth, we got to make sure that the right people are on the bus for us to actually get there. The NASA, Brady, your answer about NASA is such a like, especially the astronaut selection process. That's a very interesting concept to me because what a competitive landscape. I mean, I would imagine you've th tens of thousands of people applying and vying to be. I mean, when you're a kid, like one of the number one like professions is I want to be an astronaut, right? It's like kindergarten. What do you want to do? I want to be an astronaut. And so it's instilled, I think, in people from a very early stage. And I would imagine from an employment standpoint, filtering out and distilling, I mean, sure, don't get me wrong, how people treat reception is probably an important part, but I think if people have general manners, basic manners, maybe I'm giving maybe the human population too much credit that they have basic manners to treat people with respect and kindness, but I would like to think there's more to it. How do you go about filtering out and making like, I just would imagine there's a lot of paralysis analysis there. Like you get nitpicky. You're like, oh, he wore an orange shirt, or oh, his tie didn't look, it didn't look exactly. It wasn't my feng shui. I'm teasing, but not at the same time. How do you truly decipher between really, really good candidates, especially when for a very competitive role?
Yeah, so that it's a long process. There's a lot of assessment that happens throughout that process from medical doctors, psychological assessment. But a key process for us is involving current astronauts, current crew members, and they're looking at each candidate saying, "Can I be in a tin can with this person for 6 months or a year?" I mean, because they're literally you're together in a tin can up in space, and so that weighs heavily in the process. How can I work together with this person? Uh, and so what you find, I mean, we just actually NASA released the latest selection of astronaut candidates here a week ago. There are 10 new ones. And what you find is these are incredibly accomplished people, but they're very humble and very personable. And it's just a unique combination that we end up with when we ultimately select astronaut candidates. So yeah, that's a big part of it, though. Can I see myself living and working with this person when I can't get away from them for 6 months or a year? That's a huge factor.
Yeah. Well, I like where you're going with this, and then Selena, this makes me think of a question for you because you mentioned like, oh, during the interview process, we constantly repeat our values and our mission and everything we are about. We put it on the walls. We have all the things. I guess the question I have is how do you stress test that? Like in the interview process, I've been blown away by candidates before that ultimately, for better or for worse, I like to think I've got a good eye for talent, but in reality, I probably don't. And I've done my best and I've interviewed some really great people that like in the hours that I'll spend with them in the interview process, they're amazing. They seem like a perfect fit. Like I've got visions of grandeur for how they're going to fit in the organization. They're going to be great, great, great. And then, the pen meets the paper and it just doesn't work out. Sometimes it happens and it stinks. It's never fun. No one ever wants to hire somebody with the anticipation that you're gonna have to let them go. But I don't know. Is there a way to stress test someone beyond just a few hours that you're there together in the interview process? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely. And it's a question that we have asked ourselves time and time again. Fortunately, I work with a phenomenal talent team, and what they have deployed at Seadrill is an assessment that backs up the behavioral framework and the cultural and mission and values that Seadrill has put in place. And the assessment goes out to the candidates before the interviews. So we're assessing how closely matched and how successful will they be at Seadrill in their roles, regardless of the role that they're in, because everybody should share these same behaviors to be successful overall at the organization. So the assessment goes out to the candidate. We bring it in, we scrutinize. It isn't about a pass or fail. It's simply about how closer they are to the target and how much of it would it be a stretch for them to adhere to these. It's not a one and done, though, believe me. It's just one way of assessing the conversations. And then once the team members are on board, it's an ever ongoing conversation. It's something that we're always weaving into deployment of the personal development plans, the year-end appraisals, but just the ongoing feedback loops that really the leaders at the organization are encouraged to be having on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you can do as well is several interviews. So basically, usually the first one's online. You get to feel for how they behave that way. You get them into the facility, and like Brady said, how do they treat people not involved in the process? But the main thing is we ask them open-ended questions where they can't tell what is right and wrong, so that they have to tell kind of what they really feel rather than, oh yeah, I think I need to answer this way because that's probably what they want to hear. So we try to make our questions to them so open-ended that there's no way to say what we're expecting. And you get more reality out of those responses, at least in our view. The other thing that we make sure is you can't get 100%. So we don't overstress. If we like somebody and everybody that talked to them likes them, let's go. And then, if they work out, great. And if they don't, well, there's always a percentage that's not going to work out.
Yeah, and Garrett, I very much resonate with what you were saying. I think I'm a terrible judge of talent myself because I see possibility in people, and so I'm thinking the same way when I'm interviewing someone. Boy, this person would be great. They can do this and this, and so really resonate with what Thomas is saying. I like to involve a lot of different people in the assessment process, and usually like to bring people for a full day if I can to get them tired. I want to know how are they, because all of us can perform well for an hour or two. But if you're seeing someone for a full day and they're tired, and at the end of the day, how are they responding to interviews versus kind of the front end of the day? And then what are other people's impressions? Because my impressions usually are really good of everyone. So
No, I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. Thomas, you bring up this, I want to escalate the conversation from, hiring people on a one by one basis, but from a strategic level of where they fit in the org and what appetite slash patience level the organization has for getting this person up and ready to go. Because that's the part that I think comes down to that profitability component of this conversation. Because, Thomas, you bring up a great point. There's a certain percentage of hires we make that just don't work out. I like to think that there's this chasm of there's a percentage of people that won't work out. They never would have worked out. They were just a bad hire. Ah, shucks, we missed it. That's kind of like the way we kind of we got to shrug our shoulders and say, you know what, whoops. There's some people who come right out the gate, knock it out of the park. We knew it was a home run fit from the moment we hired them. They turned out to be a home run fit. There's sometimes the surprisers where there's like, we didn't know whether or not to hire them, and they end up pleasantly surprising us. And then there's this like middle ground of people who maybe are slow starters, where maybe they didn't get put with a great boss. Maybe they got put on a team that's currently putting out a million fires and they're just kind of like, just go and try to be productive. But they didn't get really the training, the guidance, the support really that's necessary to happen in an organization. Mind you, I like to think most organizations like the thought that they have a good onboarding process. But when crap hits the fan and you're putting out fire, 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 it's just like, I need a human with the pulse. Go out, make it happen. I do not have time to answer your questions. Just go, baby, go. So I guess the question I have here is, how do we go about as an organization communicating to new hires what the patience level we have and what our expectations are for when we're wanting to start seeing results and what those results look like? Because I think sometimes it's a little bit ambiguous, and then all of a sudden an organization says, you know what, we gave this person a shot, or this department a shot, or this team a shot. Didn't work out. We're gonna have to let them go and start anew with a new direction or a new Tiger team or a new kind of pilot program or whatever it may be. And the people end up very surprised. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I had more time here." So I guess the question I'm going at with this is, how do we, as an organization, from a strategic level, put people in a position where their expectations can meet reality for whatever our patience level is for that role and for the type of work that they're doing? Does that question make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, and it's interesting. I was over what we called the Challenger program for many years, and we would bring in new hires, and it was a very laid out kind of, here's your training plan, here's kind of the expectations, and then we would rotate them through supervisors more frequently than normal, just to get an assessment of how quickly they could get up to speed. And so what this did was allowed a separate person other than their supervisor, who's very busy anyway, to really concentrate on their attainment of that productive employee and also give them the support they needed. Because like you said, some people, you didn't even have to talk to them, they just went. And then some people, as much as you tried, would never get there. Well, this program allowed us to understand, where are these people? Where are the slow starters but are going to be great people? Let's get them all the support they need and not require the supervisor to take time away from his or her duties to do that. So a whole kind of part of HR that was, doing that onboarding plus. So first couple of years of their career would have that support.
Garrett, I'd like to offer a different perspective on this topic. With that, I'm a proponent of people starting slower, and not just at a not being just new to the organization, but also in the realm of having a promotion. I find that the people who start off at the gate, charging in, wanting to make updates and, changes right away, are really missing the opportunity to observe and understand and be more curious about why it is the way it is today. You lose trust that way as well. When you come in and you're automatically shooting from the hip, making assumptions, pulling on your previous history from your previous org or previous position. So I think where maybe the learning lesson needs to be more so is with the current leadership of the organization and saying, here's how we need to support this new team member, with understanding that patience is part of it. Absolutely. But that we own the responsibility of that patience.
Boy, I really resonate with that, Selena. We had a team member join us here at Space Center Houston recently that very much exemplified that. They brought in they had the solutions to everything without really understanding the problems in the organization, and yeah, it's put them off to a tough start. The other thing I like to think about, and our organization paid a lot of attention to, is there's three dimensions to merit. There's the task merit that we normally think of. There's cultural merit of knowing how to get things done in the organization. And then there's political merit where you're sponsored by someone whose voice matters in the organization. And so, really trying to look at when people come into the organization, how are we mentoring them to help them understand how to get things done in the organization, not just from a task perspective, but a cultural perspective. And then, do they have an advocate as well in the organization? And so those are three aspects that we try to pay attention to as people come into the organization.
I love it. Great. That's Selena, you've opened up a can of worms and I'm really excited to dive deeper into. That's really, really nice. Because I mean, shoot, how often do we hear of a CEO or some senior executive of an organization? They go to their country club, they go to their most recent board meeting, and some friend at the country club or the board says, "Oh, you got to work on this. You got to 5x your revenue within the next 5 years. You got to hit these numbers, these numbers. You got to go for these types of metrics. You got to implement this type of software." And so that CEO says, "Oh, I love it. This is great. It's going to totally change our business. It's going to be amazing. Got it. I'm on it." And so the CEO makes it their pet project to go out, hire somebody to come in and be the new operating officer, the new chief growth officer, or the new chief X officer to drive this change. And they get this new person all hopped up on the Mountain Dew, excited about making this change. They're ready to go, gung ho, thinking everybody at the organization's just online with this new change as the CEO is, only for them to come in and everyone's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here? And why? Why are you here? What are you doing? Like, what purpose do you serve?" And so they're like a bull in a china shop, just knocking things over, thinking that's what they were brought in here to do, because there was not a clear communicated goal from the CEO. And the CEO once times gets stressful because some other people in the org are like, "Hey, this new hire is changing the culture. It's frustrating." They're like, "Oh, that's horrible. I'm a people pleaser. We'll make sure the culture's not changed, but we do need to hit these growth goals and metrics or whatever we're trying to hit." I guess where I'm going within all of this is I feel like this happens very often. And so when we are executives in our organization and we see a CEO, like the highest ranking person in our organization, go off and make this kind of like wild hair, shiny object hire, and you're like, where did this come from? How do you go about challenging your CEO to give you the clarity that not only you need, but the whole organization needs to embrace this person with the level of I don't know, the level of candor, the level of embrace that needs to happen for them to be successful in the org to be successful moving forward.
One of the things that we do at our organization is have regular Ask the Teams. So it's on a quarterly basis where it is an open forum. We ask the employees to send in questions ahead of time to the executive team members, and we collect those and we make sure that we're addressing the top ones with candor. And it's just that it's having an opportunity to answer the questions that are on the burning minds of our employees, whether it's about the financial situation, where the company is going, a particular new hire. It's to address all of those. And so it's not always a comfortable or easy conversation or topics, but it's what must be done, because what we know about human nature is that if something goes unsaid, the void will be filled, and it's often with something negative.
I love that. Brady,
You know,
Thomas,
we
anything to
have
add to that? Yeah, go ahead.
instances of not only like a COO or a growth officer being assigned a task like that, but kind of almost even worse is when a consultant comes in tasked with implementing something like that. It is almost universally not well received because they're just there temporarily and they don't have to live with the results, and they don't have time, like Selena said, to grow, to understand why it is already. They just want to change it regardless of why it is what it is already. So one of the things that HR used was anonymous surveys just to get a score and then dive down into what Selena had mentioned about, questions specifically. And those could be anonymous or not, depending on, how the person felt about it. So that in a meeting, they could stand up and, the management team was ready with an answer. Because it's really bad when somebody stands up, asks the management team something, and they're like, we'll have to get back to you. That's not productive either. So I grew to like the fact that they got the questions ahead of time. I wasn't always a fan of that at first, but yeah, having to get back to them, just not good.
What you described, Garrett, reminds me of the wrecking ball leader. And there are times you need that. I know in the early days of the space station program before we flew the first module, there were a lot of technical challenges, and we brought in a strong technical leader who was a wrecking ball leader, and he kind of cleared the path, got things on track. But then came the decision point, and I had a lot of conversations with the program manager about you can't leave the wrecking ball there too long or the organization can't grow. So there's strategic use for that kind of leadership approach, leadership style, to get things on track when they need to be on track. But then you've got to know how to move them on and leverage them to other opportunities at the right time, or the organization begins to suffer.
I like it. I like it a lot. There's a point I want to come back to this on, but Thomas, I want to talk about something you brought up first about this challenge of consultants, because what you're describing is almost like the professional version of passive aggressiveness. It's like, I don't want to tell you that you're doing your job badly, but I want to bring in someone who can tell us how we can do your specific type of work better. And I think that there's an opportunity for improvement there because what you're describing is that there's a lack of consensus on what the problem is. If there's someone who's higher up in the organization who's determined there's a problem here, but they've not figured out how to address the team about what the problem is. And to Selena's point, they are not incorporating the team in the solution. They're saying, hey, I've identified a problem. I think I'm going to solve it myself by bringing some outside consultant in to work with you to make you and your team better. And then we'll see if the results are better because I don't want to have a hard conversation with you about your team's performance or what's going on or what constraints might be there.
Right. And which consultant is going to look at things and go, you know what? It's optimized. I don't have any suggestions. No consultant has ever done that.
That's right. Well, okay, I want to play a little devil's advocate here, just because I like playing devil's advocate. So, another organization I'm working with their chief operating officer. They bring in a new CEO. The board decides we're going to let the old CEO go. CEO had been there for about like 10 years. Everybody really liked him. He was a good guy. Seems like the organization was moving in a positive direction. The board says we're getting rid of the old CEO, we're bringing in a new CEO. New CEO comes in and comes with a slow approach. As you know what, for the first 90 days, I'm going to just digest. I'm going to take it all in. I'm going to see what people are working on. I'm going to see how people are working towards things. And then I'll make my assessment of what to do then. Well, 90 days goes by and he says, I think we're doing pretty good. Like I like the goals that we've set. I trust the team. I think we're on a pretty strong path. And the board swiftly and vehemently came in and said, absolutely not. We brought you in for a reason. Change needs to happen. These goals are not good enough. You need to make it happen. And ultimately, this new CEO ended up getting fired because he's like, I see he was making subtle changes, but the board wanted to make wide scale, vast changes, but they never really effectively communicated that to the new CEO in the hiring process or in the interview process, and didn't really communicate really effectively why they let the previous CEO go, which was because they were dissatisfied with his performance. So I guess where I'm coming in is how do we how do we marry that? How do we go about setting expectations, especially with our board, where maybe they want to see some swift turnaround, something where we come in, shake something up really quickly, and then all of a sudden it's butterflies and rainbows and everything's on this crazy trajectory that the board thought we could achieve, that whether it's realistic or not, the board thought we could achieve it. How do you go about, as a new executive coming into an organization, setting expectations with the team, with the board, with the people who want swift turnarounds, with the patience that's necessary to actually identify culturally who's got, and politically, who's got the sway, who's got the cachet, who's got the, I guess, the information you need to make educated decisions about what should happen next?
That CEO, that executive learned a very valuable lesson that in your first 90 days, you need to identify who your key stakeholders are. And making that identification, you go and you approach them with some key questions of asking them what their initiatives are, what the goals are, what they would assess to be successful in the first 90 days of this role. To expect that the information is just going to flow to you is unrealistic. You have to go out and search it. And it's not just with one level of key stakeholders, it's many levels of the organization. And then bringing those all together. But that's really what the first 90 days is about. It's about exploring, it's about understanding. And it's one thing about what you got from the interview, but now you've got the job. And now you have to actually put all of those plans into motion. It's not necessarily about making substantial changes, but identifying that you have a plan to make those changes and what those milestones will look like.
Yeah, I was going to say milestones too. And as you're describing those milestones to the board, you can point out why some of those are, way beyond 90 days because culturally it won't be accepted. You can explain the timing to take that immediacy pressure off yourself, but only, as Selena said, through, understanding what is the lay of the land, because you can't go in there and do it top down and be successful in most cases.
Yeah, I have limited experience with the board. These last 2.5 years have been my first experience with them, but my observation of this particular board is there are a lot of things that are unsaid. There are a lot of signals that the CEO needs to pick up on. There are questions that are asked that are really not questions, that are direction. So at that level, there's just a lot of subtlety that you have responsibility for as a CEO to pick up on and understand. You may not get clear marching orders or clear direction, but they're probably, if that CEO looked back and really thought about questions that were asked, comments that were made, the direction was there. May just not have been paying attention to it.
No, that's so great. I'm so glad you brought up that point, Brady, because well, Selena, you bring up this great point of setting very clear milestones to the board, but I think to maybe even extrapolate, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, please let me know. But I think where you're going with this is you need to set up milestones with your board up front. But then as you learn more information and details about what is going on, clear, upfront, regular communication is paramount to the success of a managing of a board. Because ultimately, if it's like, cool, I'm gonna wait till the next quarterly board meeting to update the board on the new things that I've learned, well, that could be too late because you set a milestone on day one as to what this is, what might happen. But in that first 90 days, you're gonna learn a lot. And what you might have set as the milestone might not be realistic based on the team and people you've got on board and the constraints that you're facing within your organization. And so if you were waiting for this 90-day follow-up board meeting to be like, hey, whoopsie daisies, I set a milestone that I didn't know what I was talking about because it was before I had started. Now I've got a new milestone, it's going to be this. They're going to be like, whoa, I like the old milestone. I thought it was compelling and good. And so the upfront communication, if I'm hearing you right, Selena, is critical, in frequent communication is critical to the ability to properly set expectations with the board. And then to Brady, to your point, ideally there's less signal picking up on and more like, cool, instead of, hey, are you doing anything with AI? It's not, hey, you need to do something with AI. It's, hey, we've tested AI. Here's what we've observed. Here's where we think there are some realistic applications. Here where we think it's not as realistic. I don't know. What do you think about that, Selena? Is that accurate? Was I picking that up properly?
Yeah, and I think what you were addressing too is being agile. Through the process, not only is it the importance of the regular communication in the quality of the questions you're asking, but also redirecting as you need to go and as you get more information. And that's the whole point of the observing. And when you're coming on board, is to be interviewing as many people as you can, to be collecting that information and then sharing it back and paying it forward.
No, I like that. I like that. Brady, Thomas, any final thoughts or things that, do you think are interesting as it pertains to this topic that we've been discussing?
Yeah, so I am very impressed by Brady and Selena. Being in the HR part of the organization is different than my experience, where I kind of was used by HR in certain roles, but was not a professional. And so I think that your HR team is really important. And I'm not just sucking up to Selena and Brady. I'm just saying HR, don't think of that as just a sideline thing. That's a main focus for the success of not only your executive team, but also how your, workers are motivated, you know, identifying them, hiring them, and keeping them productive across their career. And so I'm just saying, emphasize who you've got in that role.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Thomas. I think as HR professionals, we've got to know the business, and we gotta speak the language of the business to earn that credibility for the partnership. And I know one of the things at NASA that was always hard is when they promoted people into leadership, they were looking for technical experts. And I would imagine you guys at your companies face this challenge as well, because there are very few people that are the best technical experts and the best people leaders. And so trying to figure out, how to navigate that, how do your systems enable dual career paths? How do you get the right people in people leadership was always a challenge, with the rocket scientists in particular.
It's funny that
Yeah,
you,
I'll add to that on Brady's comment is that what I always recommend for new leaders, especially in human resources, because it can be a miss, is once you've identified your key stakeholders, your first question should be, how does the business make money? And we're developing our people to continue to elevate that on a regular basis, but really understanding beyond what the headlines say, how is the business making the revenue is what should be our focus as well.
no, I love that you bring that up, Selena. I think we had a different pre-symposium panel in the past couple weeks where we were talking about like what is our value to the organization and how does our business make money? Like if we are a part of a business that really is like a lubricant and accelerates the growth of the business, let's say we're the most amazing recruiter of talent in the world. Well, if we're not hiring new talent and the business is going down, your talent at recruiting amazing people is not that valuable to the business at this juncture in time because you're not hiring people. Like your time to fill, your ability to fill quality candidates means squat when you're not hiring anybody. And so I think that notion of knowing your value to the business, knowing how the business makes money, and being able to potentially adjust your skill set when times get tough, I think is really, really critical. Because, yeah, in that example of the recruiter, it's like, you get to the end of the year, you're like, well, my time to fill was less than a week, and every candidate I filled has stayed on board, and my retention is 100%, and all these sorts of things. I'm expecting to get my bonus at the end of the year. It's like, well, we haven't hired or put in a request for a new hire in months, and it's not looking great. So unfortunately, not only are you not getting a bonus, but we might have to have some reductions, and you might be one of the people that are getting reduced. Whereas if you were to say, hey, okay, I want to use my skills in recruiting to maybe help boost sales or help boost support or help boost customer success. Like you can see at least the writing on the wall where the business is and how you might be able to support other areas versus just saying, this is my silo, this is what I do, this is all I can do. But anyways, Brady, Selena, Thomas, this has been a really great pre-symposium panel. I feel like this was a really engaging conversation. We covered a lot of ground here. If you're watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to the Executive Symposium next week, October 7th in Houston. We're hosting the event at the Houston Dynamo headquarters, 5 to 8 p.m. I'll post a link in the chat in terms of how to RSVP. But everybody, thank you for your time today. Have a wonderful